Welcome to Do English, the podcast section of Yay English. Today, in the What If series, we'll explore 5 unconventional ways in which Red Riding Hood's story could have finished before it finished. And if you're still suspicious, no, one of the ways I will explain is not Red Riding Hood listening to her mother, which is, of course, the moral of the story. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe. Let's recap. Red Riding Hood is a girl who lives on the border of the woods with her mother. She is vibrant and somewhat carefree, but hey, she's got the attitude, right? One day, her mother asks Red Riding Hood to visit her grandmother and give her a basket with fruit, bread, sandwiches, and all kinds of things as a present. If Red Riding Hood's mother had gone with her, then later when the wolf approached them, they wouldn't have spoken to him, and therefore the wolf would not have known they were on their way to visit Red Riding Hood's grandmother. That is the first alternative ending. The girl then starts off her journey to her grandmother's house, and it is at that moment that she encounters a wolf. You might think that if the wolf were a vegetarian, Red Riding Hood would have been free from danger, wouldn't she? But he was a very smart and witty wolf, not to mention resourceful, in a forest that slowly started being occupied by people who wanted to cross from one place to another. He found a way to deceive at least one of them to have food. Do you think he would want to plant his own fruits and vegetables instead of saving himself the hard work? Of course not. So if he were a vegetarian, he probably would have fooled or manipulated Red Riding Hood into giving him all the delicious groceries, fruits, vegetables, and snacks that the basket she was carrying contained. And although the wolf would still have deceived Red Riding Hood, the story would end there. That is the second alternative ending. So let's say the wolf was still following his normal meat-based diet. He saw Red Riding Hood, approached her, and asked her where she was heading. But if Red Riding Hood were a liar, instead of telling the truth to the wolf, she could have invented that she was going to sell the things in the basket or any other thing. Nevertheless, let's remember that the wolf decided to wait until Red Riding Hood arrived at her grandmother's house just because he thought he would be able to have more food. Now, considering Red Riding Hood's personality, she might have not just told the wolf any lie. She would have liked to invent something out of the ordinary. Hence, the girl would tell the wolf she is keen on sweet treats, and for that reason, she built a house made of all types of bread she got after visiting each and every bakery in the town and the neighboring villages too. However, after the heavy downpour from a few days ago, her bread house had fallen apart and yes, she might have already eaten part of her house, but it still was a decent place to live in, and now she had nothing. So she took what was left of her house and started her journey to find a new one. Maybe this time one that was made from a more resistant candy material. After hearing this inordinately unconventional story being told with such strong conviction from a young girl, two things might have come to the wolf's mind. Either it was the truth or a terrible lie said with certainty. If the first thing was really true and she ate all those breads which her house was built from, she might not be such a healthy option. And, of course, it could be a lie, but it was such an unusual story that he would have thought the girl was not lying at all. Therefore, in the end, he would have left her alone. That is the third alternative ending. After that, Red Riding Hood chooses to explore the path the wolf had recommended her and takes longer than expected to arrive at her grandmother's house. The wolf seizes the opportunity he created himself and gets to the grandmother's house first. And here it comes. The wolf thought Red Riding Hood's grandmother would be easy prey, but if the grandma turned out to secretly know martial arts, more than that, being an absolute master. She could have easily taken down the wolf. Of course, the wolf would have felt his pride being trampled. After all, he always thought of himself as intimidating and, if not the strongest, indeed strong. His conceptions would have scattered after the first kick on the stomach had taken his confident breath out. Next, the anger that resulted from that first event would have dropped as fast as it had rocketed when the grandma's fist found and knocked down his fang. Finally, she would move her body down with bent knees, only to extend one of her legs and move it lightning fast in a circular move that made the wolf tumble. After he had realized he was no opponent to the grandmother and that Red Riding Hood wouldn't take long to arrive, he would have decided to run far away from that forest. In the end, he wouldn't like to encounter the strong grandma ever again. That is the fourth alternative ending. And finally, if the woodsman had noticed the wolf walk into the grandmother's house before he had arrived, then the wolf would have never entered. We barely know anything about the woodsman of the story, only that he saved both Red Riding Hood and her grandmother, so he might have been a good person. That's why, instead of punishing the wolf, the woodsman discovered he was witty and offered him a deal. The woodsman would give the wolf food on a daily basis, and in exchange, the wolf would have to collect wood and plant new seeds so that new trees could grow. And that is the fifth alternative ending. What other alternative endings can you think of? Maybe Red Riding Hood was secretly very intelligent and deduced the wolf's plan from the beginning, so she ran as fast as she could to call several officers that could help her. Or maybe the grandmother didn't live in the house everyone thought because she moved to another one. But since Red Riding Hood and her mother hadn't spoken to her for some months, they didn't know. That way, the wolf would have gone to an empty house. Let me know some of your alternative endings before the stories end. Until next time.